The way the whole process is emerging right now is it's largely being managed by statistical agencies and census bureaus within governments, and they're very familiar with demographic information and population data and may not know a lot about Earth observations. But when you think about those 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and whether it's access to clean air or clean water, improving health, and all the statistics associated with that, then there are really important environmental data sets that ought to be included in the equation. So we feel very strongly that Earth observations and geospatial information can be an enabler or a facilitator of the implementation of the SDGs, but we have a big challenge and an education exercise to undertake to make sure that those statistical organizations are relying on Earth observations also. There is a need for it, and I would say there are frameworks that exist. We talk about, obviously, the Group on Earth Observations is working at the global level, at the regional level, and at the national level to make sure that all entities across that entire spectrum that are collecting and or using Earth observations are working together. So we've got a nice global framework for GEO, but specifically for the Sustainable Development Goals, then we're working with another global framework that's being done by UN-GGIM, the Global Geographic Information Management System. And so together, there are international frameworks that just need to be leveraged. They're absolutely already there. They need to be fuller developed and fuller employed, and they need to be supported. So at the international, at the regional, and at the national level, we really need to be supporting each other's activities. Because listen, we have very specific roles and responsibilities, and it takes a community, it takes an ecosystem. So whether it's governments, whether it's not-for-profit organizations, whether it's UN organizations, or whether it's organizations like ours, which somewhere live in between those, and the commercial sector, we really all need to join forces and do a better job of leveraging each other's efforts. That we have access to potential access to more data now about the Earth than we have had before. But much of that data is still locked up in archives around the world. And so what the Group on Earth Observations is doing, particularly when it comes to public resources, is we are advocating broad open data so that you could unleash the power of Earth observations. So there's lots of data out there, but it is not all discoverable and accessible, and we need to work on that. We, GEO, are applauding are those countries that have adopted broad open data policies for government assets. So we're essentially saying whether it's from space or from the atmosphere or from the marine environment or from the land, if public resources, if taxpayers' money went into building the satellites or the instrumentation or paying the people to collect that information, then the data needs to be similarly released broadly and openly. Governments should not be charging their citizens for data that those citizens have already paid for. A lot of training is taking place globally, and there are a lot of capacity building efforts, I think we still have challenges in this entire arena to make sure that it's just not one-off events, that it is in fact sustainable and true capacity is getting built in countries. So we're doing a couple different things. We are trying to downscale what we are doing globally to the regional level, and we have a couple initiatives, both AmeriGeos and AfriGeos and a Himalayan GEOS, where we're trying to get those governments and participating organizations to come together and do a much better job of sharing their training opportunities and do a better job of integrating their capacity building efforts. So actually, much like the data challenge, there's a lot going on. We just need to do a better job of weaving those efforts together. First of all, let's go back to what we talked about, the first policy driver, which was the broad open data policies, because I would argue that for some of those data gaps, there is data that exists that would fill those gaps. And if it were more broadly and openly available, you would see the first data that's available to fill those gaps, and that's really important. Let's start exploiting what already exists. And then by looking and discussing with your users about what their specific needs are, we could start to tailor more specific data gaps and then do fresh data collection. But I can't say this strongly enough. We must do a better job of looking at existing resources before we go out and spend money on new collections. Both Geo and UN-GGIM and events like this week with Geospatial Media and Communications, by the efforts that you guys have done this week to pull together the private sector, government agencies, academia, and international organizations is absolutely essential, because first, we need to get together so that we all have a better understanding of each other's respective roles and responsibilities and ongoing efforts. So I would do that first and foremost, is let's get the people together to talk about how we each have a piece of this puzzle. So I've talked about the importance of governments, UN organizations, foundations and not-for-profits in the private sector. I think maybe what we need to reach out to a little bit more than we've done are the development banks. Particularly in the developing world, substantial resources are being put into those countries, the lesser developed countries of the world, by those development banks. And I think this entire community should be working a little bit more closely with them to help refine those investments so that we can get more payoff and more benefit from those individual investments.